Hello, everyone, and welcome to our community panel for Trans Awareness Week. This week, we are taking time to speak to different people from the trans community to talk and express about what it means to them and to break down the stigmas that are held within the community and on the outside, too. We're also going to try and do a little bit of myth busting. We'll see what we can get to. But today's theme is all about community. So, with me, I have two community workers, each from their respective communities, to introduce themselves to you guys so that they can join the conversation. Please welcome my two guests. I'm going to start with you on my top right. It's my left technically, but go ahead if you will.
Hello, my name is Jay Douglas, trans femme, they, them. Right now, I live in Tallahassee, Florida, and I am an activist. I'm an organizer and I'm a noisemaker. I try to use every day to fight for my community, and that's who I am.
I love that. Yes. Well, welcome, Jay. We're happy to have you. I can't wait for the rest of the world to meet you. And
Thank
if you
you.
would, my other guest, please introduce
Hi,
yourself.
I'm Katie Wood. I'm a high school math teacher in Hillsborough County, Florida. I am a transgender woman, she, her. And yeah, I'm only 25 years old, but I've had some experience with activism and something that's really passionate in my heart. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yes, awesome. I'm so excited too. You both are inspirations to me, and I have had the privilege of meeting you both. And I think that the work that you both do in its own right is amazing. I've been blessed to watch Jay follow, start your journey, really, right? I've gotten to see you take great leaps and bounds, especially this year on your own. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys because I'm sure you both, well, I know for a fact, Katie, you have definitely taken quite a few bullets this year as well as last year. You've definitely not been one to be shy about it as well. So I
Mm-mm.
think that we can both speak to different, or all of us can speak to different stigmas that are affecting the community right now. So I'll start with Katie on this one. What is a
Mhm.
stigma that you feel you're facing, or one that you feel your community is facing as an educator?
A stigma that we're facing and something that we're hearing a lot this political cycle and ones in recent history is how trans teachers or queer teachers are like groomers or like that are these predatory people who are like indoctrinating your kids, and that could not be further from the truth. And so I'm definitely wanting to talk about that, debunk that crazy stigma myth, and set the record straight on quote unquote gender operations in high school that we've been hearing a certain someone talk about.
Yes, because with my high school diploma, I can go and have a sex change. I
Yep.
love that. Schools are offering so much these days. I'm being sarcastic for those of you who are watching. This is not true. I do not believe this at all, but I do believe that both of these topics are things we should definitely talk about. I actually am gonna shift the discussion. I want to highlight that first one you talked about, which is groomers. Let's definitely everybody have a moment to speak about that before we move on into some of the other ones. Katie, can you elaborate on that, on how that affects you and your community?
Yeah, as an educator, it's especially teaching ninth and 10th graders math, and they don't really like math. I have to get these kids to trust me. I have to get them to believe that I have their best interest in mind, and ask them to fail and learn, and that can be super vulnerable. And whenever there's this myth or narrative that I'm someone not to be trusted, that I'm somehow going to treat your kid poorly or infect their minds with the trans virus, all the crazy stuff. That's
Mm.
just not true. What I really want your kid is to respect me so that I can teach them math. But all of these insanely bigoted, vile attacks and are really just breaking down that barrier between the relationships I can build between myself and my students and myself and my colleagues and administrators. And it's tough.
Yeah. Jay, can you speak to this topic?
I think that unfortunately, no matter what age, what job position you get, you'll find some sort of level of bigotry coming your way. And being called groomers and predatory, we're creeping, we're indoctrinating, to me is number one, ironic. And number two, just not has nothing to do with anything. I just it's a shame, and it's so unfortunate to hear Katie's story, and just how the magnitude is that much more for teachers, and for job positions and trans folks that are working jobs that are closely associated to youth and young children. It's a shame.
I think the ideology around the term predatory groomer is a far derivative of what we really are. A lot of times in our situations where we are in contact with the youth, they're looking to us as role models or idols or best case scenario, a mentor. They're coming to us with their truths and with their feelings and their emotions, hoping to be validated or get some kind of explanation that they can grasp, right? I think tangible efforts is what any kid really wants, is to be able to come and ask a question about something and have a truth that they can hold on to, but also have something they can relate to. 9 out of 10 times, whenever we're in a teaching situation, be it a parent, a family member, or anyone who is doing teaching, we always give examples. And I think having a tangible example is something that helps anybody evolve or grow or learn, really, because it puts something in that space that allows them to go back to it. When you're learning Old English, we refer to Shakespeare. When you're learning math, we refer to our teachers, or we refer to the things that make sense, right? Money. Everybody needs to know how to count and add and subtract and multiply and divide money, baby, because money is universal, right? So these are things that we always associate things with. So I think there's a huge misconception. There's nothing predatory about us. Predators stalk their prey in order to, out of necessity, right? That it's something that's happened when we're talking definitions and word use. I think if people understood what that word really meant and understood what the actions and objectives that follow that word, then its use would be valid in any sense, right? But I don't think that it's the right word. And the same thing with a groomer. The closest thing to me, if you want to compare me to the groomer I know in the dictionary, then yes, I'll help your kid have better hair and hygiene. And yes, I'll help them dress appropriately and find fashion that's suitable to their body type rather than putting them in whatever is necessarily in the closet. I think in those terms, if we're talking about the words as they really are, and I think that back when I was younger, we had the quote unquote F word. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but the 3 letter version and then the 6 letter version. When I was growing up, I immediately did what most people do and I Googled it, right? I looked in a dictionary and saw that one is the
Cigarette from
British,
England.
it's
Yeah.
English, French, and it's English and it's a
Yeah,
cigarette.
something
And
like
then the
that.
other one is a bundle of sticks. So I'm like, thank you. You think I look skinny? Oh my gosh, that's thank you. That's wonderful. I'll take it for what it is. And I think when I started to explain it to people in that manner, people stopped using it against me. And so I feel like if we take the power from the words, maybe we'll have an opportunity to change the uses of them, because people are only using them because they know that it's going to garner a response that is built off of fear. I don't think anybody really understands it, and a lot of people don't look. How many times have you heard a word and didn't and thought, I don't know what that means? But you don't open up your phone and look, or you don't open up a dictionary and look. So I think that that's those are definitely things I wish we could do, right? That's breaking a stigma in its own sense, is giving people proper definitions so that they understand what they're saying, rather than just throwing terms around because those are trendy words to use, as we so pleasantly learned in our last panel. I'm going to start using that word now. Continuing on, before we hop into the second half of yours, Katie, Jay, was there a stigma that you would like to bring to the table?
A stigma for me in my community, I think I'm speaking for any age, any identity that's gender expansive, binary or not. I want to break the stigma that trans people are doing something wrong by being authentically themselves.
Mm.
Oof, elaborate.
Well, there's layers. I believe in bodily autonomy. I fight for freedom. I fight for the freedoms that we have in this country. I'm grateful for those. And yet, as a trans person, especially in Florida, we still are faced with so many barriers, obstructions, and restrictions for us to get our proper care, and
Mhm.
for us to just be as autonomous as we should be, as those that are cisgender are, in many other areas. So I don't know. I just think that the demonization of trans people is abhorrent, and it's got to end. There nothing that I'm doing. I should be able to live my life and it not affect you. How
Eh,
I
I,
how I present should not have to do with you whatsoever. So
to jump off that, I think what you said it's totally accurate. I've been on HRT for 3.5 years. I've gone through month stretches where I could not have access to my hormone replacement therapy or my gender affirming care because of the laws that, this state legislation has passed. And a lot of people don't know that that's happening. Trans people don't really necessarily get a lot of media coverage. When do you turn on the news and they say, hey, they have passed so that adult trans people can no longer get their medicine. Like, not a lot of people know that. Like, I'll tell my family members, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, this has been happening for a couple years now. And the first step to activism is education. Like, the worst part about like it is that almost all the education comes from our community. Like, we are the ones trying to tell people. But what's really going to move the needle is for people that know trans people or care about trans people to educate themselves on trans topics. I saw a post on Facebook that I really liked where it's like, if you can't understand why your trans friends are freaking out right now, you don't have trans friends, you know a trans person.
Oh, yes, I love that one. I saw that as well.
And it's totally true. It's like our community needs help, especially in red states. And Florida has it really bad. Oklahoma has it even worse, and all these others. And it's not just our healthcare. It's what names we can call ourselves at work, which I know a thing or two about right now. And
Mhm.
whether we could change our ID on our license. So we need a bunch of other stuff. So we need people to educate themselves on what's harming our community, and then holding the people accountable that are doing it.
Yeah, I think that we hit a stigma within a stigma. I think everybody is living in a personalized bubble, and they don't really pay attention to what's happening in anyone else's bubble unless it correlates with theirs, right? And
Hmm.
so I think what's happening is that usually, or actually I can speak to like 10 years ago, you didn't hear about other communities' issues. You didn't hear about their strifes and their struggles. You only heard about their successes, right? Everybody heard about how, for instance, gay marriage was passed, but nobody knows about the road to gay marriage being
Hmm.
passed. Nobody understands how many people had to get together and fight in their individual states before we could have that kind of passing, across the entire US. And then look at the backlash we saw. We only saw the negative, right? So nobody sees the hard work and nobody sees, those small wins. They only hear about the success, and it feels overnight to many people because they've been so focused on their own thing. So here we are again in a situation like that where trans lives are at stake. And I feel like, just like with the Don't Say Gay bill, we saw a lot of people hear the trans youth ban and they assumed that it was just to protect quote unquote trans kids. But in reality, it affected the entire trans community across the
Hmm.
state. It prevented and hindered people in newfound ways. People didn't understand that trans people didn't have access to good healthcare in the first place. And that's why we had to use nonprofit organizations, and we were receiving help from nurse practitioners and
Hmm.
registered nurses and things of that nature. So when this law went into effect, people didn't realize the depth of which it really hit. It was like a lightning bolt, right? It hit the tree, and everybody just thought because the tree was standing that it was okay. But truly, the roots have been struck by that lightning too, and they're rotting. There was damage. There's burns that are not visible to everybody. So we have to do the hard part, which is speaking out loud. And I think that that's a huge thing that people miss. We're not complaining. We're not overly being dramatic. We're seriously hurt here, and we're
Hmm.
struggling to maintain normalcy. Our heads are not even above water, and people are telling us we're fine. We're not floating in a kiddie pool, guys. We're in the deep end, and we're struggling to keep our heads up. And I think people need to realize that it's okay here, though. It's not the end of days in Florida. We're not, but this is the first big hit we've taken as a community, and we're taking it seriously. We
Hmm.
need people to know that it's serious, and we need people
Hmm.
to understand just how serious that is, and to the lengths in which we'll go to make sure we're heard. We don't want to die in silence. Nobody wants to feel that, right? So I feel like as far as stigma goes, that's a huge one that the entire community is facing in every aspect. And we're lucky, right, to live in cities that allow us to effectively breathe. There are certain cities in this state that do not have that opportunity. They're not given that reprieve. They don't have facilities they can go to for care. They
Mhm.
don't have facilities they can go to for safe spaces. They don't even have established gay residencies or areas or venues that they can go participate with their counterparts or the rest of their community. They have no community there. So that's a huge realization for us, especially with smaller attacks like losing access to being on the Florida State website for travel, not having all those safe places readily available on a public website forum that everybody knows to go look at, right? Those are
Mhm.
things that we lost out on. And we're affected because our businesses are affected. And if we lose our safe spaces, then that's just another hit on the belt. So
It's a Go ahead,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead, go ahead.
It's a total it's in every aspect of society. And all of it started with this is just about little kids, this is just about this. And but everyone in the trans community at that time, and 2 years ago, whenever this started coming down, 3 years ago, is that Trojan horse. They want you to start being okay with legislating
Mm.
against trans people. They want you to start being okay with thinking about, what, these people are this or this or this, right? And so then it becomes okay, we're going to stop trans kids from, getting healthcare this, so they're not going to turn into trans adults. And then the trans adults, we're not going to let them, have any sort of gender marker changes. We're not going to provide them healthcare. It's Florida telling the state, or Florida telling its residents, we do not want you here. If you are trans, we do not want you to exist in Florida. I mean, the governor's pretty much said it himself with regards to education. And so, yeah, like what you're saying, we're not being dramatic, we're not being this. It's like, no, our rights have been taken away and are threatened to be taken away even worse. One of the presidential candidates is saying that he's going to make it illegal to receive gender affirming care on day one whenever he turns into office. Like, what? So we need people to be listening and to fight against this and to call it out and vote for people who stand up for the trans community. But we
Right.
also need, like, other people who do support trans community to not be silent about it. Bad things happen when good people do nothing. And I feel
Oh,
like we have a lot of good people doing nothing to eradicate bigotry out of our society. And trans people can't do it alone, as other marginalized communities have demonstrated in the past.
yeah.
Absolutely, Katie. To speak on the rhetoric, the legislation that's been passed, from things that have been said on the campaign trail to things that have been, set in stone, well, set in paper that can be changed, vote. To speak on all of that, it's made to keep us in fear. It's made to keep us apart
Hmm.
because they know that together is when we are strongest.
Hmm.
It takes community. It takes coming outside. It takes reaching out. It takes looking around your community. And so if anyone listening to this, watching this, gets one thing from it, it is get involved because the battle has been a battle. It's been a battle. And so many people would love and are praying for the day that they can stop fighting and
Hmm.
start living.
Amen to I'm right there. I'm
Mm.
with you, and I'm only
So,
25. So when you say get involved, can you be more specific? What are the best, if someone is out there listening and said, "Hey, I really don't like what's happening to the trans community. What can I do about it?" What would your recommendation be?
well, my first thing would be kind of a little bit into what we were talking about earlier with maybe reclaiming that sort of word or terminology about indoctrination. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I believe in talking to the experts, talking to people that have more lived experience. As a youth, I'm giving you the youth perspective. I'm 21. So, as a youth, I would do my research. I'd go online, and hopefully, everyone's transitioning to the digital age now and they're making their resources online and we're collaborating. But I would go online and I would try to find locally any sort of trans or queer LGBTQ plus organization in your area and contact them. See how you can get involved. If they're there, they're going to need help. They will not turn away help. They will not turn away a volunteer. And if there's nothing, say there's nothing in your area, create it, start it, find people, talk, start a support group at your local library, do something, get involved and join the movement.
I think to speak to two things really quickly, just to let everybody know, for those of our viewers who are not fully versed in Florida law and what's going on here, earlier this year, a ban was passed, or no, was it last year it was passed? It was this year, right? My years are all blurring together, but there was a law that was passed that basically states that all trans youth, anyone 17 and under, would not be allowed to have access to care in the state of Florida that was gender affirming care. So no HRT treatments or anything along those lines medically. And those who are 18 and older can only receive care if they're seeing a doctor. That means somebody with MD or PhD next to their name as a title. Any other care that's given for gender affirming care, in the terms of HRT being an example of one form of care and only one form, it's denied for adults. So they have to go see a doctor in person. And even then, there was some skepticism on telehealth. Telehealth is still allowed now, but they have to still be seeing a doctor at this point, basically once every 6 months, in order to continue that care. So it's
That happened to me. I was seeing an RN at Metro Inclusive Health, and when that law passed, they said, "Sorry, we can no longer." And I bounced around and tried to find places. So yeah, that's
sorry,
very.
it took place last year.
Took
Okay,
place
sorry,
last year, but
Yeah.
folks are still feeling the effects today.
It's still a very hard one, even for people who can't receive their health insurance through a job or a place like that. And then the cost of healthcare, they removed it from Medicare and Medicaid, so no one can receive it on those levels as well. So it took place last year, and that's where we're at now, and that's what we're referencing when we say the bill. It's the Trans Youth Healthcare Bill, and it's a ban on healthcare for trans youth. So it literally stops them from getting any care whatsoever. Only a few of them are grandfathered in. Now that bill is in court right now, and it has had some back and forth with its application and the ability for people to seek care within the state. It's still up in court, and it just hit the 11th court, and now we're waiting on the Supreme Court to make a final ruling so that we can know for sure whether or not it'll stay in play or it'll be removed completely. And so that is in partnership with our school bans, which we politely have renamed Don't Say Gay and Don't Say They. Those bills have since been through a huge upheaval. We just got GSAs back in school, which are gay straight alliances, or any kind of group like that are allowed now back in schools, and they can have those. But with the upheaval of DEI programs in colleges, there's a lot of just gray matter area, and there's no definitive points. And it's basically at the leisure of the institutes to determine what is acceptable and what isn't. And so if they're uninformed, then they can do whatever they want. And that's kind of how I landed in this circle with you guys. And then secondly, to bounce off of Jay and some of the different ways that you can get involved, you can not only join your local nonprofit in their efforts, but also right now, this video, although it's released the week of Trans Awareness Week, it is filmed just shy of the actual election, 1 week from the day. And so if you are getting this information at any point in time, help out your local officials. If there's a candidate that you like, joining their party and being an influence to them in that aspect, making sure that they're working towards the goals that you want. It doesn't just start at the state representative and state senator level. You can join the parties for your tax collector. You can join the party for your judges. You can join the party
Your
for your
school board.
superintendent, your school board. You can attend your school board meetings, which are held in every county regularly. There are so many levels in which you can get involved, and you do not have to be a parent to join the school board. You do not have to be a parent of a trans child to help out with law and legislation. To speak specifically of Equality Florida, we have our Pride at the Capitol every year. If you want to learn about legislation, we invite you out. We help you meet and sit with your local legislation and learn about it as it's being built in front of your eyes, so that you can see firsthand and hear firsthand the kind of things that are being said in these situations. It's open to the public at all times, so it's never something you have to pay to get in or be a part of. You just have to be there. So we all have our own ways of doing that. I know Jay works with Capital T in Tallahassee. So there are organizations out there doing the work hands down in your city. You just have to know where to look. feel free to reach out to any of us at any point in time if you're watching this video and ask how to get help. We have a resource guide that's on Equality Florida's website that will send you to all of the organizations in your city or area as well. So just know that the information is out there should you choose to look for it, and it's accessible. It doesn't require anything other than just using your fingers on your phone. So just wanted to touch on that. And I do want to
Or
go back.
Siri.
Oh yeah, you can ask Siri or Alexa, whichever one you prefer. You can ask either one, and they'll let you know. So I wanted to go back to something Katie said at the very beginning. I don't know if you were joking about it, but we're going to talk about it. The ideology of sex change in school.
It's ludicrous. Okay, so like I said, sorry, ask your question. This pisses me off. So
Let me get it out first. No, oh no. So the ideology that is going around, it's a term that was used, and I think it was used improperly, and I think that the world took it and ran with it. It was like someone playing football and they ran the wrong way with the term. I think when it was initially introduced, it was meant to be as in sexes and gender, because they were changing the terminology to sex at birth. So they were saying you could go to school and change your sex. And I think they meant as in like, you could change your gender marker or your gender identity in school and come home. You could go as Tommy and come home as Tina. And that was the analogy that was used. And I think that they meant that in the wrong way, but now it's transpired into people coming into school as one thing and coming back with an actual sex change, having gender affirming surgery in school.
insanity.
In school.
And I would like to remind everybody that this is not something that anybody on this panel has said or agreed upon. This is something that is being said across the state by full-grown adults who are in positions of power, who have never probably met a trans person or very little to nothing about the trans process and or community. And so
You're
we
telling me it
definitely
can
want
happen in 8 hours? That's it? I didn't know. And for free? I
for
didn't.
that's the part. It's not the eight
That's the
hours part
crazy
that gets me.
part.
It's the free part for me. Most
Yeah.
surgeries take a few hours, so I could see that. But be able to walk home from school after said surgery, this is like these little kids are tougher than adults. I mean, full surgeries
So
with no anesthesia. Like this is all a
No
joke, actually. Like
aftercare.
So this is something that former President Donald Trump has said, Donald J. Trump, sorry, has said many, many, many times that kids are going to school, they're getting surgery, gender affirming surgery, although don't call it gender affirming surgery, but that's a language that we use, and then coming home with different physical parts. I want everyone to think about this. Like when you got a cut at school or whenever your tummy was hurting and you went to the school nurse, when they try their best, but were the things that they were allowed to do performing 8-hour surgery? It is illegal for me to hand out ibuprofen to my students. Like, what are we talking? We're not
I
living
was
in
lucky if I
reality
got
anymore.
calamine lotion for a mosquito bite. So what are we talking about?
There is not a single instance of this happening anywhere in the United States of America. And it's crazy that we have to debunk something so insane.
it really is wild. Like I don't know, Jay. Do you have anything to add to this one?
I have nothing but humor to add to this
Uh,
because to me it's so laughable. I don't know
Clearly,
if
I
they're
can't stop.
expecting anatomy physiology, what course on the class schedule. I don't know the details. I don't know the specifics. But bring us patient 0 and then we'll have something to talk about that's serious.
Honestly, as somebody who has undergone gender confirmation surgery, who has done the full process, I can assure you that there is no child in the world strong enough or willing to sit through a surgery like that without anesthesia. And I'm pretty sure you need a parent's permission to do anything with anesthesia on a child legally. Like no one who's touching your child with any kind of medications, like Katie said, you can't even give ibuprofen without permission.
Can I just say,
So
if
it's
the teachers are
insane.
sending the kids home with permission slips to watch a certain movie, are they operating on your children? No,
No.
they're not.
I want to, and you said something earlier that I want to jump back on, is how you said that HRT is only one form of gender affirming care. And I feel like that is so important and that people don't understand. So whenever children 12, 13, 14 are feeling different things about, their identity, or, now that people know about trans people, they're thinking these thoughts, and maybe they have a name for it, maybe they don't. And they go to these clinics, these, gender health specialists. They spend years and years with no medicine whatsoever. It is all therapy. It is all talking with the kid over a period of years to make sure that to figure out what the kid's feeling. Is it going to change year after year after year? What can they do non medical intervention like to support that kid? That's what gender affirming care is for a child. Puberty blockers, it takes years for them to get on puberty blockers, and most of the time they've already started puberty, and
Yeah.
puberty blockers are irreversible. And so when we're looking at the gender affirming care that kids are getting, it is rarely ever surgeries or anything like that. It's just totally factually inaccurate.
I think that just to speak on something that you mentioned about the puberty blockers and about the care that the kids are getting, I want to emphasize that the process to the road to puberty blockers and the road on puberty blockers is such a road. It's not a vasectomy. You don't get a puberty blocker and you're done. It's not that simple. You have to get on them. And then that is a process in and of itself. It takes time. And every single person that takes them, it's different. Some feel the effects sooner, some feel the effects later. But overall, it's something that although it's irreversible, it can be spread out enough so that there is time for them to make decisions or changes as needed. But for them, that's a journey for them. That's a journey only they can go through. And we can't predetermine it. We can't tell them how it's going to go. We can't push an ideology on that because it may not happen. But I also want to emphasize that it's the same exact path and pattern for an adult. As a trans female, I started living my life as a trans woman about 14 years ago, but I didn't start taking the process seriously, going through the actual steps of it till 7 years ago. I've only been in transition for 7 years, and it's taken me 7 years to get to where I am now. And I am somebody who is lucky enough to be blessed enough to have the income and the insurance to have the assistance necessary to secure my timeline. But I will say it took me 3 years on hormones to get to a place where I could start to consider surgeries and processes. And even with that, I think it's important to acknowledge and realize that I'd already done a lot of the internal work myself through therapy, counseling, and with a psychologist.
Mhm.
So there was no room for error, and there was no room for looking back or feeling any kind of mistake or anything like that. And so I think when people talk about our thing, no one wakes up and instantly transformed. There's only one person in the history of my life that I've ever seen go and do a full physical transformation and then literally regret it. And that is that horrible woman who was married to Caitlyn Jenner, or Caitlyn Jenner, that's what it is. They went and they did the surgery and then they regretted it, their body. They did it before their body could change. And had they listened, had they actually done the process right, they would have allowed the hormones to change their body before they got the procedures. And they would have actually been in a place mentally to handle the weight of that. They would have been able to take on that transition in a much better place. And I'm sorry that they had to deal with it the way that they did, but that was their choice because they could afford it. Who we're talking about? We're talking about children, and we're talking about adults who have consented to the process, who have met with their doctors and actually had the opportunity to learn about the pros and the cons. That's another thing that we're forced with here, that people don't know. Before we can even start the process right now, we have to actually get a piece of paper. There's a 14-page form for one gender and a 19-page form that we have to go through before we can even start care in the state of Florida. The health world in the US is so against that they removed many of the barriers for us simply because this form exists. The things and the processes that I had to go through to get to where I am today are no longer in place because the health organization was like, pull that back. We're not even going to make y'all go through this because we even feel like this is too much. And just to debunk something that's not talked about often enough, in 2018, trans people were no longer looked at. Since 2018, it's been removed from by the World Health Organization, by the APA, and by other institutes that trans people are no longer looked as mental disorders or
Mhm.
diseases. It's a full stop. It is not that, it never has been, but now it's recognized for what it really is. And it's a gender dysphoria, which is more or less just a position that the person is in temporarily as they transition into their new lifestyle, into their
And
new
to
body, into their new gender. their chosen gender because that's how they feel. And that dysphoria is not even considered a disorder or a disability or a disease. Just so we're clear.
What you're saying, to piggyback off that, every single respected mental health organization in the United States recognizes that gender affirming care is the treatment for trans people, right? If you have diabetes, the treatment is insulin. If you experience gender dysphoria, gender affirming care is the solution to that. But the problem is that we have a lot of people who think they know more than the smartest doctors in the United States. There is not a single respected medical health organization in America that doesn't support gender affirming care, that doesn't say that this is the correct treatment and that we need access to these services.
I was going to say, well, Florida struggles simply because our Surgeon General believes in demon blood, but that's all I was going to say. It's a real story.
Lunatic. Yeah.
Real story. And it's a Black man nonetheless. And he fully believes. There's articles written about him loving demon blood, or not loving it, but believing in it, like believing that it exists. And he's found it and seen it. And that's just him. So it's hard to fight when that's what we're up against.
Well, for the presidency, we're up against an adjudicated rapist. So I mean, it's like, we're calling
He
a
also
spade
made
a
millions
spade.
off of telling people you're fired, so I can only imagine. But here we are, round 2. So, but at the end of this, we're done at this point, guys. Unless anybody has any last remarks, I do want you guys to go through and name. We named a lot of them, but I want you to be really specific. Thanos snap time. If you could get rid of one stigma or bust one myth completely instantly, what would it be? Hey, Katie, by chance, do you have one?
Yeah, it's the expectations that we put on ourselves as trans people and I'm certainly not all the way there yet, but I feel like so many people earlier in their transition, they believe that their transition, the end goal for that is to be cisgender. And all of their actions and all of their movements is to achieve a goal that cannot be achieved. And but when we peel it back, what transition and the expectations that we need to have are what makes us feel good, what makes us individually feel better about ourselves, and take the steps to do that. Because I know I spend so much time online looking at Angelique saying like, oh my gosh, she's so gorgeous, I will never ever be like that. And
Oh
my
my God, don't make me
dysphoria
cry.
feeds into that, and I'm comparing myself, like to other people, or these trans supermodels, Hunter Schafer, and I'm like, oh my
Oh,
gosh, and that's really destructive to our mental health as trans people, expecting us to be perfect when it is gritty. There are a lot of days where, I miss a spot when I'm shaving and I go into work and I'm like, oh crap, or I look in the mirror and I really don't feel good about myself, or I try to do makeup and it's like, oh, that doesn't really look good. Um, but if we have to do things for ourselves, not because other people place those on ourselves, whether that
mhm.
means, tucking, or whether that means wearing makeup or not, or whatever the case might be, like, live your life authentically to you, not the expectation of you as a trans person.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think that that's such a huge one for us as a community. I think I always tell people that there's a journey. I hate the saying and I hate how it came about, but the truth in it is undeniable that you have to truly learn to love yourself before you love someone else. And I think that
Hmm.
people mistake that ideology of loving yourself as just saying I love you to yourself. I teach kids in schools, and I can't wait to get back to high schools and teach it. But there's a process in which you learn to love yourself by starting to look at yourself in the mirror. You
Hmm.
can love yourself internally, but the external part is the part you have to love. And love is self acceptance. Love
Hmm.
is truly looking at yourself and accepting yourself for the things that you have and you can't change, and the things that you want to change, and learning that there's a difference and that you don't have to
Hmm.
change anything to love yourself. That those changes should only be made if it's going to help better you.
Hmm.
So I encourage everybody to always start with, like, one thing I say, like, start with your eyes and work your way around your face, or start with your smile, start with something that every time you see it, it lights you up, and then work your way throughout your body. And so I just want to say to you, Katie, you're an inspiration to me. I love your story. I love who you are as a human. And I think that you're a beautiful person, both inside and outside. So I think that more or less, maybe you might not hear it enough, but I'm here to speak that honestly and truthfully. It's It's the reason why I always look back to you and remember you. And I'm so thankful for you being here and sharing your story and your inspiration. Yet again, you never cease to amaze me, I say. And
Well,
then
thank you.
Jay, you're welcome, love.
Okay,
Yeah.
so to piggyback off of what Katie was saying, beauty does not look like one thing at all. Society, I feel like, has been trying to slowly break that myth and break that stigma over time. And we still have a lot of work to do. But beauty does not look like one thing, and neither does trans. Trans could be many things. Like for me, I identify as a trans femme, they, them. So, what does that look like? Well, I'm a trans femme, so I'm femme in nature. Could you call me non binary? Sure. But it looks like a lot of things. Basically, what I'm trying to say is being gender expansive doesn't mean that you have to look like anybody else. It doesn't mean that you have to equate to any sort of beauty standards. I think the real beauty is being comfortable with yourself and being confident in who you are and expressing yourself in the way that makes you feel the best. That is what's most beautiful. And that's what I admire from our trans community. And while looking at so many different trans individuals and icons, no matter what society might say they're supposed to look like, what a woman might look like, what a man's supposed to look like, there's beauty in us all. And I just wish that we would realize as a community that there's a lot more to life than just completing your transition,
Mhm.
because that's only part of the journey.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think that the reminder here is that trans people are not monolithic. We
Mhm.
learned that gender is not monolithic. Women are not set in the standard. I think societal standard and expectation often gets blurred with reality. We're so used to and conform to these ideas in our head or what we're told that we don't even realize things can be different. And then when we do, it becomes a difference between breaking the reality and breaking the ideology. And somewhere where they fall, I think 9 out of 10 times people like living more in the ideology versus the reality. So the idea that trans women are supposed to be act and or want to be like societal women is the false narrative. I think the idea is that we just want to be women for the most part. And that can mean anything, whether we're Rosie the Riveter or we're, the 1950s housewife, or we're the new age woman who wears the pantsuit and goes to work. I think the ideology behind us needing to have children in the house and the white picket fence is societal. The idea is that we want to have those things because we need them to survive. We need them to thrive. We don't need them necessarily to identify as women, but as a cultural survival need, like a living necessity to be successful in life, not necessarily to be a woman in life, if that
Mhm.
reads right. I think that that's the ideology that we have to break free of. I think most people live in societal ideology and not reality. And that is something I wish that people would separate themselves from or would break. But that is time for today. Thank you both so very much for taking this time to be with us. Thank you. We're going to edit this down. This was another really great one. I'm thankful to have you both. Thank you once again, Katie. Thank you once again, Jay. We'll be continuing the conversation throughout the week. We'll have other panels for you to check out and see. So make sure you tune in tomorrow for our next panel and get to continue the conversation as we explore Trans Awareness Week and the members of its communities to help you break the stigma and be a part of the thing that busts the myths. Thank you again. My name is Angelique Godwin, and I will see you guys later.